Hello and welcome my friends to another Saturday morning arcade. I am Savino as always, and today we will take a look at the first beat'em up that didn't belong to Technos Japan. Released by SNK in August 1988, P.O.W. Prisoners of War is a product of its time, influenced by action movies from the 80s and, of course, the Cold War. Like previous game in the genre, P.O.W. didn't have much to offer when it came to story. All you need to know was in the title and in a small cutscene, not too different from those in Double Dragon, showing your character blowing his cell door. This scene is pretty awesome if you pay attention to it. All you can hear is silence. And then the fuse starts to crackle, and a huge explosion takes over your speakers. A brief moment of silence follows the explosion, and then the action begins with the soundtrack kicking in and enemies coming at you at full speed. It's a pretty cinematic open, way more impactful than those from Double Dragon or Kunio, and as you will see ahead, these scenes are a commonplace in the game. It's a pretty cool scene that shows everything you need to know. You had a chance to escape, and now you need to survive. The story of your escape will unfold with some minimalist cutscenes after you beat a level, showing a static screen with some basic text. The game will never tell you where you are or who your enemies are, but it's clear that your characters are US soldiers and your enemies are the Soviets. I mean, the characters' names are Snake, not that one, and Bort. Also not that one. And your enemies' uniforms and vehicle patterns are pretty similar to those the Soviet used. Sure, SNK wasn't making any statement here, as you can see by the lack of any symbol from any of the sides, but the influence is pretty clear. There are some action scenes here similar to action movies from the time, and they are pretty cool. You will see choppers following you throughout the level, seeing enemies coming out from transport vehicles, and watch bikes exploding and killing anyone near them after you drop their pilots. It's a visually impactful game with some pretty cool scenes that, for the time, were pure adrenaline. Like Double Dragon, P.O.W. tried to tell the story with elements in the levels, showing how alarmed the enemies got as you advanced in the levels, bring more and heavier equipment to deal with you. Unfortunately, the execution wasn't as well made as in the Technos game. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see that SNK was tackling some contemporary themes instead of copying what Technos was already doing, and it's honestly a shame that the war theme in beat'em ups was explored so little. Visually, P.O.W. was pretty good for its time. Heck, even by today's standards, the game looks pretty good. The characters, while not too big, are detailed enough that you can easily appreciate every detail in their uniforms. Pockets, belts, and even suspenders are easily discernible here. And despite them all being from a single army, you will find some good variety here, with enemies with bulletproof vests, enemies with tank tops, enemies with army hats, and others using berets. It's honestly pretty good. Sure, you will see a lot of repetition here, with most of your enemies being regular troops and green or grey, but since this is an army, I don't think the clones are a problem here. When it comes to the background, things are also pretty good. They are flat, with no parallax whatsoever, but at the time no one was expecting this type of effect in a game like this, or even in any game. Aside from that, they are colorful and pretty detailed, and in some you will even find some movement, which was rare at the time. I mean, you can see some water moving here on this waterfall, and this is way more than you can see in Double Dragon or Renegade. Now, one thing that I think P.O.W. did way better than the others is how much depth the backgrounds have. Sure, it's far from perfect, but compared to Double Dragon, they look way more expensive and, ultimately, better. The animation here is simple but effective and on par with what games offered back in the day. However, I would like to point out the stun animation of your enemies when you hit them, which is extremely good. Although this animation is part of some problems this game has, as we will see ahead. When it comes to the soundtrack, well, P.O.W. disappoints a bit. It's not that the soundtrack's bad, but I don't think it fits very well to the game. There is a tune in the third or fourth levels that almost feels happy and would fit pretty well in a mascot platformer game. It tries its best to add drama with some fast and ominous notes in some points and excitement in others, but I don't think there is anything here that will stick with you after you beat this game. But while the soundtrack is nothing to write home about, the same can't be said about the sound effects. The game has some very good hit effects and some awesome explosions that will make your speakers tremble. You even have some dramatic screams when your character dies. Check it out. Now, one thing that caught my attention here is how the music vanishes every time a chopper appears on the screen. I'm not sure if this has something to do with the number of channels the board could handle or if it was a design choice, but after you notice this, it's pretty hard to unnotice. I believe some of the music use the same channel as these effects, so they decided it was better to mute the music to avoid it sounding weird, but if you know the technical reason behind it, feel free to comment below. But despite having some nice graphics and awesome sound effects, when it comes to combat, P.O.W. left a lot to be desired. While the game was clearly inspired by Double Dragon from the way the combat is presented to the colors of the characters, what you have in place here is a far cry from what Technos achieved 2 years earlier. Here you have a punch, a jump, and a kick. You also have the traditional flying kick, and you can use a back attack by pressing attack and jump at the same time, and a headbutt by pressing punch and kick at the same time. While these 5 different attacks sound like a good number, things are way more restricted than you may imagine. To begin with, you don't even have a basic sequence with your punches, you just repeat the same movement over and over again until your target's dead. I mean, you have a jab and an uppercut when pressing punch, but the uppercut will only happen when your enemy is about to die, so I wouldn't really call it a combo. Compared to the games that came before, it seems SNK learned nothing, or simply tried to do something different from what was beginning to be the standard. And even if there were a few combos here and there, in the end, you would be hitting the air more than the enemies. I mentioned the stun animation is cool, but at the same time, it will take the enemy away from your range, forcing you to move a bit every time you try to land a punch, completely breaking any flow the game could have. Sure, one can argue P.O.W. had a bigger focus on weapons, but even so, for a game that came 2 years after Renegade, the combat feels pretty archaic. Another thing that SNK didn't learn from Technos was the presence of a boss by the end of each level. Here, you will face a bigger horde of enemies at the end of each level, usually coming out from a vehicle, and after that you'll be prompted to keep going right, just to be suddenly halted by a fanfare and the end of the level. There are a few characters here that you could classify as bosses thanks to their unique moveset, but even so, they will die as easily as the regular enemies, so calling them bosses is a bit of a stretch. In Double Dragon, these bosses were big and memorable, like a Bobo or Willy, and not only were they way more resilient, but you also had no doubt you were fighting someone important. Here, they are simply another army guy. I mean, you could imagine you would be fighting choppers and tanks here, but they simply come and go, leaving a trail of regular Joes, regular Ivans, in their wake. Yes, P.O.W. has a bigger emphasis on weapon, but even so the selection is way smaller than what you could get in Double Dragon. Here the only weapons available to you are knives and machine guns. The knives are your regular affair, you pick them and they are gone after you throw them, but the machine guns are another story. They usually come with 10 rounds, and not only the bullets pierce every enemy, but they will also die with one single hit, even the guys who appears to be bosses. If you don't want to waste your bullets, you can use your kick to bash your enemies' heads with the back end of your gun. After your bullets are gone, you can still hit your enemies with your gun for as long as you can hold it. The gun will stay on the ground if it has any bullets left, but after your magazine is depleted, it will vanish as soon as it touches the ground. The machine gun and how you could use it as a melee weapon was a pretty interesting addition to the formula. It seems like SNK saw Double Dragon and Contra and thought, why not both? Now, one thing that's pretty impressive here is the AI. Enemies are incredibly smart and they can give you a lot of trouble. They can take advantage of your mistakes, they can counter your attacks if you keep repeating the same move, they can duck from your bullets and knives, and they will actively try to make you drop any weapon you are carrying and try to use it against you. They can surround you with ease thanks to their speed, and they will give you a lot of trouble if you let them pile on you. Don't be fooled, these guys are well-trained soldiers. The AI make this game a pretty hard one. Your character has only a few bars of life and enemies can drain it pretty quickly with some taking almost half of it with one single attack. And the game also gives you only 2 lives per credit, so beating this one with only 1 credit can be pretty challenging. P.O.W. was a nice first attempt from SNK. In some senses, this game paved the way for games like Mutation Nation and Sengoku 2, but it was far from what the genre was becoming at the time. If it was the first beat 'em up ever, I would say this was an incredible game, but coming little more than a year after Double Dragon and 2 years after Renegade, and presenting this type of simplistic combat was a bit disappointing. Despite its ambitions, P.O.W. felt more like an evolution of Kung Fu Master than Double Dragon. While the game had some positive aspects to it, and even some innovations like the different ways of using your machine gun, it lacked what made beat-em-ups, a newly born genre, so addictive. Good combat with some variety and good feedback. P.O.W. was later ported to the NES, and following the tradition, the game was pretty different from its arcade counterpart. The NES port was the only one the game had for decades. It was later ported to the PSP and PS3, and more recently it was ported to the PS4 and Nintendo Switch, thanks to the preservation efforts from Hamster. And that's it for the video. If you made this far, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more beat-em up things in your life. I'll be back next week with a nice list of unfair arcade beat-em ups that I think you all will agree is a fair list. But until then, I hope you all have an awesome week, and remember, keep arcades alive.